She predicted it herself, sitting in a Bowie County courtroom in October 2022, watching body camera footage of her own traffic stop play on a screen for the jury. Taylor Parker asked a guard if she could stay out late that night. She wanted to watch herself on the news. According to Assistant District Attorney Kelly Crisp, who told this to the jury during sentencing, Parker also believed she was going to be on Netflix, maybe a Lifetime movie. She said it out loud. 2 years later, she was right. The documentary came out. The jury gave her something else. To understand how a woman ends up on death row for a fake pregnancy, you have to go back further than most coverage does. Not to the October morning in 2020 when everything collapsed. Not to the gender reveal party, or the maternity photos, or the silicone belly. You have to go back to a hospital room in 2015, where a decision was made about Taylor Parker's body while she was unconscious and could not object. By the time Taylor Parker married Tommy Wakesee, she already had 2 children from 2 different relationships. A daughter named Emerson, born when she was 17, and a son named Trey, born during the Wakesee marriage. Her brother Zachary Morton testified at trial, as reported by KTAL News, that their father had been the kind of man who put his own pursuits before his children, and that Parker had developed the same pattern. When she became fixated on a new romantic partner, her focus shifted entirely away from her kids. That testimony was offered in her defense as context for her behavior. The jury heard it. Trey's birth was complicated enough that Parker underwent a tubal ligation shortly after. 2 years later, she suffered an ectopic pregnancy and was rushed in for exploratory surgery. While she was under anesthesia, doctors found an ovarian cyst and extensive scarring from endometriosis. According to court records cited by Us Weekly and Oxygen, Wakesee gave the surgeon approval to go further. Parker's uterus, cervix, and 1 ovary were removed while she was asleep. She woke up unable to ever carry a child again. She had not consented to the procedure. The decision had been made without her. According to appellate records reviewed by Brutiful, waking up to discover what had been done to her body without her knowledge left Parker furious. She had not been given the choice. Whether that experience genuinely shaped what followed, or whether it became a story she later used to frame herself as a victim of her own circumstances, is something the trial record cannot fully resolve. What it can establish is that in the years after the surgery, she began telling people she had multiple serious illnesses: cancer, multiple sclerosis, a stroke, a rare blood clotting disorder. These claims ran long before the fake pregnancy. The pattern of constructed medical narratives preceded the pregnancy lie by years. During her second marriage, she asked friends to consider acting as surrogates so she could have more children. That marriage lasted roughly a year. By 2019, she had been divorced twice, had given up custody of her son in the divorce settlement, and was living without the biological possibility of the future she had publicly described wanting. She met Wade Griffin at a rodeo in East Texas that summer. He remembered her, according to his documentary interview, as a pretty girl who lit up the room when she walked in, smiling from ear to ear. She moved into his home that fall. January 2020, she told him she was pregnant. She had been with him for 4 months. What happened over the next 10 months is the part people know, but the texture of it is more detailed and more calculated than most summaries capture. Parker did not simply claim to be pregnant and hope the story held. She built every layer of the lie with sourced materials. A silicone pregnancy belly purchased online, fake ultrasound images, some of which her own OBGYN, Dr. Christopher Mason, later recognized as images taken from his clinic's own records, from years before the claimed pregnancy. A gender reveal party in March 2020, where a cow with a pink bow around its neck was used to announce the baby's gender. Parker sent the party organizer, Griffin's friend Stephanie Ott, a document from the Northeast Texas Women's Clinic showing the gender, but the date printed on the document read 2016. Ott called Parker immediately. Parker said, according to Ott's testimony reported by KTAL News, that there had been over 200 misprints that day at the lab and they would send a corrected copy. The corrected copy arrived. The party went ahead. Running alongside the pregnancy was another lie entirely. Griffin had also been told he was with the heir to an oil fortune, that her grandmother's estate would leave her millions. Large purchases followed. $100,000 truck, a car for Griffin's mother, plans for a $4 million ranch in Oklahoma. None of the inheritance existed, but the purchases were real, which meant the lie had visible consequences, which meant the people around her had financial and emotional investment in a version of her that was entirely constructed. Griffin later testified that throughout that summer, their time together was very limited. She told him she was insecure about how her body was changing because of the pregnancy. He accepted that. He said they never really did anything at all, pretty much. In documentary terms, director Jessica Dimmock later noted that the pregnancy itself may have been less about the baby and more about keeping Griffin in the relationship, that having a child together was the mechanism she used to lock him in place. People around Parker were already suspicious by spring. Stephanie Ott never fully shook her concern after the misdated document. Griffin's mother, Connie, heard the rumors circulating in their small East Texas community that Parker could not be pregnant. A former friend named Mackenzie Bright knew about the hysterectomy and told others. In Maternal Instinct, Pulse has been. Bright described how word was spreading within its private circles. All the people who knew were telling each other, she said, but Parker's pattern was to keep moving, to get far enough away from any one community before the lies caught up with her. Connie Griffin told the documentary that the family assumed at some point Parker would simply fake a miscarriage. Nobody was imagining the alternative. Reagan Simmons-Hancock's mother, Jessica Brooks, recalled the moment when Reagan received a message at a doctor's appointment from someone questioning the pregnancy. Reagan sighed and said, "People were just being cruel to Taylor. That is just how people are." Reagan defended her. In the documentary, director Jessica Dimmock observed that Parker had deliberately positioned herself close to Reagan, partly because their pregnancies overlapped. She could bond with Reagan over a shared experience that only Reagan was actually having. Dimmock noted that Parker got together with Reagan under the premise of two expectant mothers sharing that chapter of life. Only Reagan was pregnant. Only Reagan was going through her third trimester. Parker's first ex-husband, Tommy Wakasee, knew the truth. He had been present when the hysterectomy was performed. In mid-September 2020, he anonymously texted Griffin to warn him, providing details about the surgery and telling him the ultrasound images Parker had been showing were from her older children, not any current pregnancy. Griffin forwarded the texts directly to Parker. That is the moment the case becomes something different. According to KTAL News trial coverage, investigators found that Parker's online search history changed immediately after those forwarded messages. She began searching for where pregnant women gather. She watched videos of cesarean sections. She looked up out-of-hospital birth protocols and how to deliver a baby preterm at 35 weeks. Her due date had already passed. Her boyfriend now had reason to doubt her. She was out of runway on the lie, and her response was not to find an exit. It was to research how to acquire a baby by other means. That should have been the end of the ruse. It was not even close to the end. On October 5th, 4 days before the murder, Griffin's mother, Connie, testified that Parker was supposed to be induced at Titus Regional Medical Center. That morning, a fire broke out beneath Griffin's house, later determined by a forensic investigator to have been intentionally set. The same day, a bomb threat was called into Titus Regional Medical Center. Investigators later connected both incidents to Parker. The hospital was evacuated. The induction was canceled. Connie told her son she believed Parker had made the bomb threat herself. He left. Parker told Griffin she would now deliver at McCurtain Memorial Hospital in Idabul, Oklahoma, on October 9th, and on the morning of October 9th, she arranged for Griffin to drive a trailer full of hogs to a buyer in Wynnewood, Oklahoma, for a sale worth just over $6,100. The buyer had already told Parker weeks earlier that the deal was off. Griffin arrived at an empty property with a full trailer and no transaction. Parker had removed him from the state on a fictional errand. At 6:35 in the morning, surveillance cameras showed Parker buying gas. She drove to New Boston, Texas. She walked into the home of Reagan Simmons-Hancock, the young mother she had photographed at her wedding in 2019, carrying a Starbucks coffee and a baby gift. Reagan was 36 weeks pregnant. Her 3-year-old daughter, Kindly, was home What happened inside that house is documented in the medical examiner's testimony. On it, Dr. Melinda Flores testified at trial that Reagan Simmons-Hancock sustained 113 sharp force injuries, 15 stab wounds and 98 incised wounds, and 39 blunt force injuries consistent with a hammer. 2 knife wounds perforated her jugular vein. Several were deep enough to reach bone. Her nose was fractured. She had 5 skull fractures. The forensic evidence showed blood in multiple rooms, which prosecutors told the jury indicated Reagan moved through the house while the attack was ongoing. She did not stop. A prosecution witness later testified that Reagan's own fingernails were found embedded in the placenta, physical evidence that she had been fighting back at the moment Parker cut her baby from her body. The scalpel used in the extraction was left at the scene, still lodged in Reagan's neck. Before leaving, she stuffed the placenta into her own clothing to simulate the appearance of having recently given birth. She left Reagan face down on the floor. Kindly was found unharmed in another room, hiding under sheets on a bed. Parker drove toward Oklahoma with the baby on her lap. She was already on a call with 911, telling the dispatcher she was in labor and on her way to McCurtain Memorial Hospital. Less than 30 minutes after leaving the house, a state trooper pulled her over near DeKalb, Texas, for driving erratically. The body camera footage that later appeared in the Netflix documentary shows Parker in the car, baby in her lap, telling the officer she had just given birth on the side of the road. The officer could see the umbilical cord going into her clothing. She was taken to McCurtain Memorial Hospital. At the hospital, she refused to allow a vaginal examination. When doctors finally examined her regardless, there was no evidence of pregnancy, no evidence of recent childbirth. Her HCG levels, the hormone produced only by a placenta, were 0. An ultrasound confirmed there was no uterus. While this was unfolding in Oklahoma, Reagan Simmons-Hancock's mother, Jessica Brooks Briggs, had driven to her daughter's house after Reagan stopped responding to messages. Brooks testified at trial that she called out Reagan's name and said it was Mama and asked her to please talk to her. Reagan did not answer. Brooks called 911. Parker was arrested the same day. The trial opened in September 2022 in Bowie County, one of the most closely watched capital murder proceedings in the county's modern history, according to TXK Today. 142 witnesses testified across the guilt and sentencing phases, which ran for a combined total of more than 2 months. Jury selection alone had taken most of the summers. During the guilt phase, prosecutors reconstructed the 10 months of fabricated pregnancy, the faked sonograms, the gender reveal, the silicone belly, the approaching due date that left Parker with a lie she could no longer sustain. The jury deliberated for about an hour and returned guilty verdicts on capital murder, murder, and kidnapping. The sentencing phase lasted 25 days. During it, prosecutor Kelly Crisp told the jury what Parker had been doing in jail while awaiting trial. Court documents filed by the Bowie County District Attorney's Office, reported by KTAL and WDBJ, stated that Parker had engaged in a sophisticated plot to frame a mentally fragile fellow inmate for Reagan's murder. She allegedly wrote 2 false confession letters that included non-public details about the crime, details she had inserted specifically to make the confessions appear credible, and attempted to have them attributed to the inmate. She had reportedly been practicing other people's handwriting for years. Wakasee confirmed this at trial, spending more than 20 minutes on the stand identifying her hand in various documents. The jury also heard that prosecutors said Parker had gone to the river after the murder to dump evidence before driving to the Oklahoma hospital, with GPS coordinates cited in court. Crisp told the jury during sentencing that Parker believed she was going to be famous, that she thought she would end up on Netflix, that when her traffic stop video played in the courtroom, she asked a guard if she could stay out late to watch herself on the news. During her sentencing rebuttal, Crisp showed the jury a photograph of Reagan's body at the crime scene. There were muted gasps in the gallery. Crisp told the jury that Parker had sawed Reagan open with a scalpel while she was still alive and then slashed her throat to make sure she was dead. For the first time across 2 months of trial, Parker herself was openly crying. Allspan. The jury went into deliberations at 11:13 in the morning. They were back at 12:30. Death came back on November 9, 2022. 90 minutes of deliberation. She became the 7th woman on Texas death row and the first woman in the state to receive a death sentence in 12 years. Judge John Tidwell's final order from the bench was 5 words: take her to death row. Reagan's mother, Jessica Brooks, addressed Parker directly at sentencing. She called her an evil piece of flesh demon in open court. Then she described what it had been like to walk into her daughter's house and find her. Allspan. She said she called out Reagan's name and told her it was Mama and asked her to please talk to her. Reagan did not answer. Parker's defense had argued frontal lobe syndrome, neurological damage affecting behavior and impulse control. They argued she was unwell, flawed, but human, and asked the jury whether a person should be defined by their worst decision. The prosecution's answer was the 10 months of preparation. The purchase of materials, the gender reveal, the misdated documents with instant cover stories, the bomb threat, the fire, the fake hog sale, the reconnaissance visit the night before with a gift and a coffee, the search history after the warnings arrived. Impulse does not maintain a lie for 10 months. Impulse does not set a fire and call in a bomb threat on the same afternoon. The jury agreed in 90 minutes. In November 2025, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld Parker's conviction and death sentence after reviewing 25 points of error her attorneys had raised. In May 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear her petition without explanation. No execution date has been set. Parker sits at the Patrick L. O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas, the youngest woman on the state's death row, waiting on a habeas corpus process that could take years. Netflix did come, exactly as Parker predicted it would. What she could not have predicted, or perhaps what she did not factor in when she imagined watching herself on the news, was that it would air after she had already exhausted every direct appeal available to her. The Supreme Court had already declined to review her case. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals had already affirmed the sentence. The documentary dropped into a world where the legal outcomes were settled. The audience was watching a case that had already ended in a death sentence, being told by the youngest woman on Texas death row that she believes she is where she belongs. Both things are simultaneously true, and neither one closes the story of what happened to Reagan Simmons-Hancock and her daughter Braxlyn Sage. If you want to follow where this case goes from here, the habeas proceedings. The Reagan's law legislation her family is pushing for. Subscribe. Those developments are coming, and this channel will cover them as they do.